After the recent military escalations between Iran and Israel, where the U.S. was involved symbolically but in a limited manner, the focus of the international strategic community has shifted back to one of the world's most important maritime choke points, the Strait of Hormuz. Although the matter of closing such a waterway has been around in various forms of threats since the 1980s, the current situation in the Middle East is a clear signal that those threats are going to be actual events instead of mere rhetoric. Accordingly, the issue of how the world would react to a decision of Iran to shut down or impose restrictions on the strait is now not a merely theoretical discussion. It is a current situation that is capable of affecting the whole world. Why Hormuz matters. The Strait of Hormuz acts as the main artery through which around 20% of the world's oil for trade and more than 30% of global liquefied natural gas are transported each day. Its narrow geography, only 33 kilometers wide at the narrowest point, makes it a region that is unstoppably within Iran's influence. This location is critical as it is the area where the Middle East's vast oil resources are transported to the world's markets. A conflict here would not only be equivalent to cutting off the energy export infrastructure in Gulf countries like Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and Qatar, but also to a power outage in international energy markets. In a global economic scenario currently facing various challenges such as supply chain realignments, inflationary trends, and geopolitical rivalries, the closure of Hormuz would not just be an energy crisis, it would be a major systemic event. Military feasibility and constraints. Technically, Iran definitely has the capabilities to disrupt or block the strait for a short period. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or IRGC, has multiple layers of assets in the region, such as fast attack boats, coastal missile batteries, naval mines, and drone systems. It has been building and rehearsing asymmetric strategies that are intended to fool the shipping lanes and stop the U.S. from intervening in its navy. These strategies are implemented through repeated exercises. On the other hand, Iran could carry out such a closure or be the major disruptor, but the continuation of it would be difficult. This move would most probably incite a very strong and well-coordinated military counterattack from the United States and its partners, which may also include a multinational maritime security coalition, apart from those opponents mentioned. Besides that, the international community would certainly impose severe penalties on Iran in the form of retaliatory actions, diplomatic isolation, and economic freefall. Therefore, it is possible that Tehran wants to continue to calibrate its harassment or partial closures instead of implementing a full-scale blockade. Energy security and economic fallout. An incident in the Strait of Hormuz would cause a very rapid increase in oil and gas prices, and Brent crude would probably go to more than $150 a barrel in the first few days of the crisis. Energy exporting countries, especially in Asia, where China, India, South Korea, and Japan are the main players, would not only have energy shortages, but also energy price inflation. After the Ukraine crisis, Europe changed the direction of its gas imports to Gulf LNG, but it is still going to be affected. Though some capacity exists in the form of overland pipelines, like Saudi Arabia's East-West system, these alternatives are not sufficient to make up for the shortage of the flow through Hormuz. The impact would be felt globally through inflation, increased shipping insurance charges, currency instability, and lack of investor confidence in emerging markets. At the end of the day, the economic cost would not be limited to energy consumers alone. It would hit the very core of the global economic interdependence structure. Diplomatic and legal implications. International law legally defines the Strait of Hormuz as an international strait. That means it is the free navigation route allowed for ships under the law of the sea. This right of passage is given to ships registered as UNCLOS, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. Although Iran is not a party to UNCLOS, and they firmly believe that they have the right to issue regulations for traffic, especially at times of insecurity, they nonetheless are free to assert their prerogatives. This situation of uncertainty in the interpretation of the laws only goes to highlight a bigger issue. Necks, like Hormuz, are not only regulated by law, but also by power. When the legal norms conflict with geopolitical situations, the implementation of the law is more influenced by the use of force, negotiations, or peacekeeping units than by court decisions. In the course of the global order's evolution towards multipolarity, traditional means of enforcement are more and more divided. The international community has to come to terms with the fact that maritime governance is at its end. Global responses and strategic calculus. If Iran were to interfere with the transit in the Strait of Hormuz in a serious manner, it would necessitate a strong reaction from the United States. The latter has always considered the freedom of navigation as a vital interest. To this end, they could send their naval forces, form coalitions as in 2019, and carry out Operation Sentinel, or ask the UN Security Council to solve the issue, though Russia or China would likely block any resolution. European countries could request the de-escalation and the mediation of the conflict, but they do not have a unified military force in the region. China and India, on the other hand, need to think about their next moves. They can't lose their energy security, but they shouldn't look like they're sticking with the West, otherwise they'll be in trouble with their other friends. Russia might be in a good position to profit from the rising oil prices, but on the other hand, it has to be careful not to damage its partnerships in the region. Most importantly, nations in the Gulf region such as Oman, Qatar, and UAE are expected to be at the forefront of diplomatic efforts to calm down tensions, using their secret communication channels to reach a truce, thus preventing the situation from spiraling into open warfare. The hypothetical closing of the Strait of Hormuz has attracted attention to it not only as a regional conflict, but also as a challenge for the international system. It displays, first of all, the weakness of energy and trade flows, which are extremely dependent on special narrow geographic corridors. Oddly enough, after so many years of discussions about energy diversification and supply chain resilience, the world still remains terribly dependent on several maritime corridors that are at the center of geopolitical struggles. The second point is that this event shows the absence of any credible regional security framework in the Persian Gulf. Several next attempts to build inclusive architectures, whether led by the United States, Russia, or even China, were not successful in creating crisis prevention or conflict resolution mechanisms. As a result of this situation, the region is no longer strategically stable, but becomes reactive all the time. On the third point, the whole situation with Hormuz undermines those sea governance foundations that still remain. Legal concepts like transit passage only work when they are supported by a multilateral consensus and have credible enforcement. In their absence, rules give way to power politics, and coercive signaling becomes a tool of diplomacy. The precedent it would establish at the same time would lead to other choke points at play: the Suez Canal, the Bab el-Mandeb, and the South China Sea. In conclusion, the crisis would be a strong reassertion of the supply of preventive diplomacy. The current escalatory spiral between Iran and Israel, compounded by the lack of sustained dialogue mechanisms, leaves the door open for miscalculation and unintended conflict. Restoring regional diplomacy, be it through a new Gulf security initiative or improved nuclear talks, is not an option, it is a must. In conclusion, the Strait of Hormuz is definitely not just a maritime corridor. It is a political fault line where local crises meet with global insecurity. The manner in which the international community deals with or neglects the danger could be the factor that decides the path of world peace in the next 10 years.